The Church of Santa Maria in Trastevere was a 12th century church built over the ruins of earlier churches. They believe that the earliest church on the site was a Domus Ecclesias from the 3rd century, maybe around 220. Parts of this are not medieval, such as the 19th century portico in front. And in the 19th century, when they did some restorations, they also destroyed works. There were pagan images on the spolia, or the columns and other parts of building blocks that had been brought from Roman architecture. So there was also some destruction as well. But there's a lot of interesting things in this church. What we're going to look at is the conch of the apse, or the half dome over the apse of the church, in this very innovative mosaic. Now, the apse mosaic was created somewhere around 1140. And this is during the reign of Pope Innocent II, who reigned from 1130 to 1143. So we know that the mosaic was created sometime between 1130 and 1143. I just thought 1140 is a nice round date. And we know that it was created for Innocent II because he's depicted there, right beside the Virgin Mary. And he's depicted as the patron of the church, and also he is standing in heaven among the saints who are around the heavenly throne of Christ and Mary. Now, as you can see, and this is why it's very interesting iconography, we have Mary and Christ enthroned together in heaven. They're in heaven with ecclesiastical saints. In other words, all of these saints that are shown are clergymen. And here's some details that you already saw at San Clemente. Up above, there is this wonderful decorative concentric patterned arcs with the hand of God reaching out. And at the bottom, there is a frieze of sheep. And those details probably were taken from, copied from the San Clemente apse mosaic. But this has new iconography. And as we said, it's Mary enthroned with the adult Christ. Now, we have seen images of Mary in the conch of the apse, say at Hagia Sophia, for example, or other Byzantine churches, holding the infant Christ. But here, it's Mary with the adult Christ, and he seems to have his arm around his mother, who is crowned as a queen. And this has been called the first coronation of the Virgin. Now, it's not actually the act of crowning, which we do see in some later art, where Christ is putting a crown on Mary's head. It's as though she's already been crowned. She's already crowned and enthroned and seated on the right hand of Christ. Mary is shown as the Queen of Heaven, as Maria Regina, enthroned beside Christ as King of Kings. And we know that she is the Queen of Heaven because she is the mother of the King of Heaven, the King of Kings, Christ. And the mother of a king is a queen. In England, they call her the Queen Mum, or sometimes it's the Dowager Queen, but she is the Queen of Heaven. And Mary as the Queen of Heaven has been an important theme in medieval art ever since the Council of Ephesus in 431 declared Mary the Theotokos, the God-bearer, or the Mother of God is how it's expressed in the West. And we have seen many, many images of the Virgin enthroned holding the Christ child. But this is the first image of Mary enthroned side by side with the adult Christ, who is showing his love by embracing her, by having his arm around her. Within this, we have essentially two major themes. One is what we just talked about, Maria Regina, Mary, the Queen of Heaven. And the second one is Maria Ecclesia. Ecclesia means church. So here we're seeing Mary as a symbol and the embodiment of the church, which is one of her very important titles and symbolic roles, if you will. Now, in the 12th century, we see a new interpretation of the bride in the Song of Solomon, the Cantum Canticorum, or Song of Songs in the Bible. It's a long history of interpreting the Song of Songs allegorically. It's God's love for the Hebrew people, as God's love for the individual soul, as God's love for the church, Christ's love for the church. And because Mary was symbolically identified with church, this idea of Mary as the bride of the Song of Solomon comes into being. So the first place we know about it is Rupert of Dut's commentary on the Song of Songs, which is around 1125. And Rupert of Dut's is a prolific, he writes a lot of things. He's a prolific Benedictine theologian from the monastery at Dutz, which is near Cologne in Germany, Culm. And that's the first commentary identifying Mary with the bride of Song of Songs. It's fairly quickly followed by a Burgundian theologian, Honorius of Autun, who also identified Mary as the bride in the Song of Solomon. Now, Mary is both a symbol and an embodiment of the church. And as the song shows Christ's love for the church, it also shows Christ's love for his mother, Mary. Mary is also a model of the monastic virtues: virginity, humility, obedience. And the Pope, Innocent II, had been a Benedictine monk before he became Pope, so he might well have known about this commentary by another Benedictine. Now, we mentioned this ecclesiastical emphasis, not only the idea of Maria Ecclesia, Mary as the church, but the fact that the only saints that are shown in heaven are ecclesiastical saints, are clergymen. And the most prominent, of course, would be St. Peter, who is right next to Christ, holding his key, sort of out in front. And he, of course, is the first pope, the first bishop of Rome. And then beside Mary, we have Pope Innocent II. Now, why so much emphasis on the church? And probably on the papacy. We've got two popes, the first one and the contemporary one, who is the patron of this work of art. And the sheep, we've already seen going clear back to early Christian times that the sheep in the middle, who has a halo around his head with the cross in it, he is a symbol of Christ as the Lamb of God, and the other sheep refer to the apostles. So it has been suggested that showing these sheep here refers to apostolic succession, the idea that all of the bishops received their authority passed down from the apostles, from the disciples, on to the subsequent bishops. There may be a reason for all of this emphasis on the papacy, the two popes, the contemporary pope and the first pope, and all of the ecclesiastical saints. Innocent had a problem with his papacy. You may remember that there are times when more than one person claimed to be pope, and various factions supported one or the other. At this time, the Pope was elected by the bishop. At this time, the Pope was elected by the clergy of Rome. And sometimes there were disagreements. So what happened was that Innocent was driven out of Rome where he went to see Lothar III, and Lothar comes back with Innocent, and then Innocent crowns Lothar the emperor in exchange for his support of Innocent's papacy. However, he had to crown him in San Giovanni Laterano, St. John Lateran, because the Church of St. Peter in the Vatican was held by Innocent's rival, the other pope. Let's just say there were further adventures, but eventually his rival, Anacletus II, died in 1138, leaving Innocent the pope. And then he's uncontested. So this is probably the reason for this mosaic being represented with the particular iconography that it has. Innocent is right there, up in heaven with Christ and Mary, and this shows the divine approval of Innocent's contested papacy. Yeah. Christ himself, Mary herself, support Innocent. And this also makes it likely that the mosaic was commissioned during the later part of Innocent's reign, after his rival was dead, because then he would have had the power, the wherewithal, in order to commission this mosaic. So I think probably the circa 1140 date probably is probably closer than, say, 1130. But that's an argument anyway. So here we see Mary as Queen of Heaven and the divine approval of Innocent's papacy.